one of the most formidable men I've had the privilege of knowing in or out of uniform, formerly in uniform, now out of uniform, namely Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, United States Army retired, has taken strong exception to the idea of Elena Kagan replacing John Paul Stevens, who was, as has been observed by others, but most especially by Alan West, the only member of the United States Supreme Court who was a combat veteran. We were thrilled to have this pretext to invite Alan West. Has been a guest on this program before. He currently is running, in full disclosure, for the Congress of the United States from the 22nd District of Florida. We have him on for his expertise, as we don't endorse candidates on this program, but we are thrilled to have him with us to talk about the Kagan nomination, among other things. And Alan West, welcome back to Secure Freedom Radio.
Well, thanks so much, sir, and it's always a pleasure to be on your show, and greetings to the listening audience.
Well, and thank you. And let's greet the listening audience with your thoughts about Elena Kagan. We don't, to be truthful, really know very much about this woman. So what is your source of greatest concern about her?
Well, the thing is, when you start appointing friends not based upon qualifications, that's a big concern. But in that clip that you just played of President Obama, he said that we would be getting the same excellence and the same leadership as Justice John Paul Stevens. I find that very hard to believe when you're nominating someone that has never been a judge. And also when you think about the fact, as I brought up, about losing a combat veteran from World War II in the Navy and not replacing them with someone that has that same type of expertise. Instead, we're bringing forth a person in Elena Kagan, who, when she was there at Harvard, brought forth the ban on the ROTC programs to be on that university. So, of course, that case, when it was brought before the Supreme Court, was voted down unanimously, 8-0, if I'm correct. And I would want to know, very simply, does she continue to have that stance against the ROTC programs? And what would she have to say about the Supreme Court ruling against that case that came up, which was brought about by herself? And I think something else is going to be very important as we understand this 21st century battlefield. What is Ms. Kagan's stance on illegal enemy combatants getting constitutional rights? Because I believe that sooner or later that's going to be something that goes before the Supreme Court. We see the Somali pirates. We see Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. We see more and more the underwear bomber. More and more of these people are being, granted U.S. constitutional rights. And I think that is a complete and heinous abuse of our Constitution.
Yeah, I think your point is very well taken, Alan West. We're speaking to from Florida. We don't know where she would come down on these sorts of issues. We've not seen judicial rulings by her. We've not seen really representations made by her other than, in the capacity of the dean of Harvard, as you mentioned in the ROTC case. And Alan, let me just draw you out on this particular point, because for those listeners who haven't been following this as closely, the argument that she used to justify her refusal to allow reserve officers training to take place on Harvard's law school campus was that, or recruiting, I should say, not just training, recruiting to take place, was that the legal prohibition on avowed homosexuals serving in the military was immoral in her view, and I think reprehensible. And, this goes to the core of something that you, as a combat veteran, a man with long and distinguished service in the United States Armed Forces, obviously have a considerable appreciation for, and I can understand why you would be concerned that she might not, namely the culture of the military.
Yes.
In an environment when we are asking people to serve 3, in some cases 4 combat tours in the course of their careers, and to do so as volunteers. What is your sense if this were to be overturned, if this law were to be repealed as she so clearly would like to see happen?
Well, the first thing is the culture of the military is totally unlike the civilian culture, because our profit margin is in lives. It's not in, dollars and cents. So I think that that's something that people have to look at. And then it's also something that a lot of people have to realize, that the military is somewhat a discriminatory organization. As a commander, I put people out for not being able to pass a physical fitness test, not being able to run fast enough, bouncing too many checks. I mean, you can write someone up for punishment for not having a proper haircut or, maintaining their equipment in a proper way. So these are the type of things that separate us from the normal civilian society. And if we are going to have someone as a Supreme Court justice that has a personal affinity for a certain type of lifestyle, which, that's her choice, that's fine, but that cannot be used as a means by which she will make a judgment against an organization like the United States military, not considering what our mission is and not considering how that will affect our readiness and how that affects the relationships amongst soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guards.
Yeah, and what you've, I think, touched on is really so clearly the nub of the issue, that there are unique characteristics to service in the military. People who haven't done it may not be able fully to appreciate it. Certainly, if they were to make rulings that are uninformed by that experience, there's a real danger that they will do violence to the military, and in a way that we can't afford at a country as a country in a time of war. Speaking of war, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, let me segue here to the visit of Hamid Karzai, the president of Afghanistan, to Washington at the moment. As you know, there's a very public course correction on the part of the government of the United States from what might charitably have been called tough love that was being applied to Hamid Karzai to a kind of love is never having to say you're sorry kind of, unconditional love. And the U.S. ambassador to Afghanistan, a former general you may have worked under during your time in Afghanistan, Ambassador Carl Eikenberry, who's been very, undiplomatic, shall we say, about some of his criticisms about Hamid Karzai, recently said this as he was, headed here with the president, and I'd like to just play this clip and get your quick reaction.
President Karzai told me as we were flying away from Gondar that he has high hopes for his visit here and that he looks forward to discussing Afghan-American relations from the perspectives of security, governance, development, and long-term strategic partnership. And this visit comes, as you all know, during a year of consequence. This visit will be followed by a consultative peace jirga in Kabul at the end of May, when President Karzai will meet with his people to build national consensus on how to proceed with reintegration and reconciliation of Taliban elements.
Well, this is the story that what's supposed to come out of all of this. Colonel West, what's your sense of what will, in fact, be in prospect for U.S. Relations with Afghanistan?
Well, one of the first things we have to realize, Frank, is that when you start talking about reconciliation with the Taliban, that leads me to believe you don't understand what the Taliban is, and you don't understand what their goals and objectives are. And to believe that you can sit down and negotiate with them, and them all of a sudden recognize a secular government which goes against their basic ideology and premise as very radical Islamists, that's not going to happen. And I think the most disturbing thing for me is the fact that here we are 9 years in Afghanistan and we're still fighting major combat operations. It's all because of the fact that we got too much in a hurry to focus on nation building and all of these infrastructure building without ever really defeating the enemy. And I think you even see that right now in Iraq, when we just had one of the most deadly days in Iraq just yesterday. So, we have to get focused with our military resources, and with the additional troops that are coming into Afghanistan, we've got to get them out off of these large bases, get them into the rural areas so that we can we have to deny this enemy any sanctuary and safe haven. We have to also interdict him along the border areas to preclude him from infiltrating into Afghanistan, being it from Pakistan, Tajikistan, or any of the other, or even Iran, any other border areas. And that's the critical things we need to look at. We need to look at an operational retooling of the objectives over there for that combat theater of operations. And, it's not so much about the governance. Security has to be the number one objective right now, because until you have a secure situation, governance is not going to be stable.
Yeah. We're talking with Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, currently residing in Florida. And I guess what I'm struck by is what you've just described, which makes eminent sense to me. I think it's just really common sense that you start with security and then you worry the governance piece and so on. It sounds like it's exactly the opposite of what General Stanley McChrystal is trying to do as part of the, establishment of security in some of the urban centers, essentially leaving to the Taliban. The border areas and some of the more rural areas. Have I got this right? Is there a sharp disagreement between the two of you?
You have it absolutely right. And the thing is, there's a parallel to this. In Vietnam, when we had the Strategic Hamlet program, when we had the special operators that were out in the countryside, that were not allowing the Viet Cong to have infiltration into those areas where they could get men, material, food, water, resource support, and we were being very successful. But when they drew that program to an end and they brought people in onto large bases, that allowed the Viet Cong to come into the countryside where they could intimidate tribal leaders, they could get more fighters, they could get food and water, shelter and resources, and that made the fight even tougher. And it's the exact same thing that's happening here in Afghanistan. It's a tough area. There's no doubt about it. I spent 2.5 years there. There's some extreme altitudes you have to deal with, but that's something that we are going to have to do, and we've got to get those NATO countries that are there with us as well to get out into those areas, because it's a shame now that we're talking about retaking the heart of the Taliban in Kandahar when that was something that should have been done years ago when we first went in 2001 and then subsequently the years after that to secure Kandahar, to secure the Helmand province area, which is right for the opium trade, and then also understand the importance of Uruzgan province, which is where Mullah Omar is from. So that's how we have to get inside the enemy's head and start denying him those sanctuaries.
There are reports that I've not seen picked up anywhere else other than the blogosphere at the moment, but that Mullah Omar has actually been captured, Colonel West, and I think that would be a very heartening thing if it's true. We'll be monitoring it closely, needless to say. In the meantime, we thank you so much for joining us and for lending your expertise to our understanding of these problems of the possible nominee having very, very troubling views on national security issues, Elena Kagan, and what we should be and are not doing in Afghanistan. And I also want to salute you, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, for being the first candidate to sign the Peace Through Strength platform that I talked about at the beginning of the show. And I urge all of our listeners to join you in doing so by, again, going to peacethroughstrength.com. Alan West, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll be talking again soon, I hope. Next up, we have Andy McCarthy talking to us perhaps a bit about Elena Kagan as well, but certainly about some of the extraordinary developments that are happening now, including the Washington Post seemingly seeing the light on the folly of the Obama administration's handling of detention and interrogation and what it means for you. All of that straight ahead.